Hello and welcome to ATI 4640. In this session, we will address the flow of information from the customer to supplier of suppliers and the flow of material and information from supplier of suppliers all the way to the end user. The group or network of companies will include manufacturers, distributors, retailers, and anyone involved in the process. From this argument, you can see that companies will be processing raw material to create a final product and deliver it to the customer. This network of companies is called the supply chain, and it involves lots of activities, the flow of material, the flow of information, and transactions. With all these activities and all the involved companies, there is a need to manage the supply chain. The goal of this session is to address supply chain management. As an example of a chain of companies serving customers, the chapter started with the Red Lobster's supply chain. Red Lobster is the world's largest seafood restaurant, serves 140 million meals annually from over 700 restaurants. A winning operation strategy requires a winning supply chain. The restaurant is committed to seafood sustainability and seafood service. The restaurant sources food from 5 continents and thousands of suppliers. The Red Lobster supply chain or chains incorporates supplier qualification, product tracking, independent audits, and just-in-time delivery. The main objective of managing the supply chain is to structure the chain in a way which facilitates the flow of material, information, and transactions, maximizing its profit or its competitive advantage. This will also increase the customer benefits. This is a diagram that shows the supply chain for a beer company. The raw material starts from tier 3 supplier that supplies the basic raw material, and that will go to tier 2, which supplies more processed material, to tier 1, which makes either bottles or cans. Now, tier 1 supplier in this example will supply the brewer with cans and bottles. The crops needed for the beer will be sent from the farms to storage facilities. Then it will be shipped to the brewer. The brewer will process the raw material and either can them or bottle them, then send it to distributors. Distributors will send all the products, the finished product, to retail stores to be sold to the end user. To manage the supply chain, we need to integrate and coordinate all activities needed to procure material and services, to transform them into intermediate goods and provide the final product to the end user. The coordination will include suppliers, manufacturers, and or service providers, distributors, wholesalers, retailers, and end users. Managing the supply chain will create a successful chain that can compete with other similar supply chains in the market. Actually, competition is no longer between companies, it's between supply chains. The supply chain's strategic importance comes with the integrated long-term nature of supply relationship with the company. Large portions of sales dollars spent on purchases from the suppliers. A well-managed supplier relationship will improve innovation, speed design, and reduce costs. A strong supply chain will be able to find alternatives to avoid the extreme changes in the market and recover as fast as possible. Technology will be utilized to support the success of the supply chain through effective communications and scheduling capabilities. The table on this slide shows the supply chain costs as a percentage of sales for the different industries. With these percentages, you can see the importance of creating and managing those relationships with suppliers within the chain. The example in this slide shows how reducing the cost of the supply chain as a strategy will provide better profit percentage than the increasing sales strategy. Reducing the cost of the supply chain by 5% resulted a profit of 15%, while increasing sales by 25% resulted 12% of profit only. The question now is how the supply chain decisions impact strategy. Remember that we have three strategies for the product, which is the low cost, the response strategy, and the differentiation strategy. So for supply chain decision, we have a supplier's goal, where in a low cost strategy is to supply demand with lowest cost possible. While in a response strategy, supplier's goal will be to respond quickly to changing requirements. And in a differentiation strategy, the supplier's goal will be to develop product or service that is different than competitors' products in the market or service. Based on those strategies, the primary selection criteria for supplier in the low cost strategy will be based on the cost. So if the supplier has the lowest cost, I will select that supplier because I'm basing my strategy, my company strategy, my product strategy on the low cost. While if the fast response strategy, the selection of the supplier will be based on the supplier capacity, the supplier speed, and the supplier flexibility to be able to respond to me as fast as possible. For the differentiation strategy, supplier selection will be based on selecting the supplier with the most skills in product development, a supplier who will be able or be willing to share information and jointly and rapidly can develop products and again respond to the market. The low cost, rapid response, and differentiation strategies will impact decision in supply chain inventory, in distribution network, and in product design characteristics. One of the decisions that we discussed before is the decision of making or buying. If the company decided to make the component in-house, the company has to make sure they have all needed resources available, such as facility, people, equipment, technology, and the budget to do that. Now, if the company decided to buy instead, then the company needs to find the source or sources for the required components. The sources for these components is called suppliers. So basically, when we say source, we need to find a supplier. Source the component means find the supplier for that component. When making the company, when we are making within, then the company still will source or find the supplier for the raw material that will be required to make in-house. Also, they will be finding a supplier for the technology or for the equipment or anything that will be needed to make in-house. When buying, the company will find a source or supplier for the component themselves. Whether making or buying, the company must find a supplier who is reliable and can fulfill demand when needed with consistency and quality. We can use the term outsourcing to indicate or refer to the concept of transferring the activities and resources to an outside vendor. Lots of organizations outsource their activities to a national or even international vendor seeking for efficiency in specialization and low cost. Outsourcing will allow the organization to focus on core competencies such as reliability, fulfillment, just-in-time quality, customer service, so on. In addition, outsourcing will decrease inventory cost. Firms outsource information technology, they outsource accounting, they outsource legal, they outsource logistics and production. There are 6 strategies that can be used in sourcing or finding the proper supplier. The first strategy is having many suppliers, but using bidding. So we establish or we publish a bid, and then we request for information or request for quote or for request for proposal from those suppliers for the bid that's been published. We will have certain criteria for that. We'll be maybe looking for cost, quality, reliability, consistency, fulfillment, and response of the supplier to our bid. Otherwise, we can use a long-term partnering strategy where the company can partner with fewer suppliers and for long term. A third strategy is the vertical integration strategy, that is developing the ability to produce goods or services previously purchased, or actually we can acquire the supplier, or we can acquire the distributor, or both. So the company will own both sides, and then they can control the quality, consistency, and reliability of the production and services provided. The fourth strategy is joint venture, which is an agreement between two companies while retaining their distinct identities. The fifth strategy is Keiretsu strategy, which is an intermediate strategy between few suppliers and vertical integration. The last strategy is the use of suppliers on as needed basis, and we call it like virtual companies. I will talk about that in details. The many supplier strategy is commonly used for commodity products, although there might be other factors as mentioned in the previous slide. Cost might be the main reason for selecting a supplier from the group. Supplier will be competing with each other to provide the lowest cost and adding other competencies as needed so they can distinguish themselves and win the bid. Once a supplier being selected, they will be responsible for technology, expertise, forecasting, cost, quality, and delivery. Everything. That's a commitment with the agreement, with the signing the contract with the company. That will be part of the agreement that as a supplier they should do all that. Actually, that will be stated in the invitation for bid or request even before they submit, so they know when they submit, they know that they are committed to these conditions or to these requirements. In a long-term commitment strategy, the buyer would like to have a relationship with fewer suppliers that are dependable. Those suppliers are willing to get the product to the buyer just in time. They are also willing to contribute with their expertise in the design and technology. So yes, it is a partnership, but they have a more commitment than just providing the material. They can provide lots of expertise to the company. This commitment creates value through the economy and the cost changing. A supplier will be huge. Trade secrets and other alliances may be at risk because now lots of information has been shared between the two companies, and they have to be careful when doing that. This figure shows the idea of vertical integration, where the company can be forward integration or by owning the distributor, or doing backward integration by buying or acquiring the supplier, or by doing both backward and forward. You can buy, if you have the money, you can acquire both the distributor and the supplier. For example, an automobile company can own the steel supplier and the distributor or distribution system for the automobile companies. In fact, they can vertically integrate backwards all the way to the mines if they want. The mines that produces the iron ore. So whatever they can acquire, they can acquire, and then they will be just one big huge company although we have different products and different maybe even management for each company or for each tier, but still they are under one big umbrella under the vertical integration. As we stated before, vertical integrations means developing the ability to produce goods or services previously purchased. That integration can be forward towards the customer or backward towards the suppliers. Owning the supplier or the distributor can improve the cost, quality, and inventory of the company. But it needs capital, it needs lots of money to do that. It needs stable demand. Since you have a flow of demand on that one, then yes, you can purchase, and you need managerial skills. It's not easy to manage all these entities into one big group. Sometimes it might be risky, especially in industries with rapid technological changes. Joint venture is a formal collaboration or an agreement between two companies to create a new corporation to enhance skills, to secure supply and reduce costs through joining, while each company retain their distinct identity. They have their name, they have their own board or their ownership. They are not changing the identities, but they are creating a new entity that will create that kind of collaboration and coordination. The challenge will be to cooperate without tampering with the brand or giving away competitive advantage. Keiretsu Networks is a middle ground between few suppliers and vertical integration. Um, in this network, that supplier becomes part of the company coalition. In this case, the company provide financial support for their supplier through loans or maybe owning major stocks or stock share. Both the company and the selected supplier expect to establish long-term relationships and provide technical expertise and stable delivers. This strategy may extend through several levels of the supply chain. Usually, this last strategy is used by the virtual companies that rely on the variety of suppliers' relationships to provide services on demand. This strategy will provide flexible organizational boundaries that allow the creation of unique enterprises to meet changing market demands. Those companies depend exceptionally on lean performance, low capital investment, flexibility, and speed. In a global environment of increasing specialization, low communication cost, and fast transportation, companies are making less and buying more. Um, this means more reliance on supply chains, which means more risk. Having fewer suppliers makes the customer and the supplier more dependent on each other, increasing the risk for both. Risk will increase more and more due to globalization and logistics or logistical complexity. In any supply chain, the vendor reliability and quality might be challenging. With the new model of a tight, fast, low inventory supply chain, operating across political and cultural boundaries adds a new dimension to risk. Going global means the organization has to deal with any political and currency instability in other countries. There are major categories of risks and tactics that will help manage those risks. Supply chains will research and identify possible risks. Partners will assess risks and create a successful strategic and innovative plan to mitigate risks. Planning will reduce potential disruptions and prepare for responses to unavoidable negative events. Flexible and secured supply chains will be a start to minimize a variety of disruptions. Diversifying supplier base may also help in reducing associated risk. The table in this slide and the next four slides list some of the supply chain risks, the risk reduction tactics and examples for the identified risks. For example, the risk that was identified by McDonald's supply chain was the risk of supplier failing to deliver. The tactics were using multiple suppliers, effective contracts with penalties if they did not fulfill, and subcontractors on retainers and pre-planning to make sure that uh, uh, everything will be delivered before we start a business in that area. So McDonald's planned its supply chain 6 years before its opening in Russia. Every plant, bakery, meat, chicken, fish, and lettuce. Where can I get it from? How can I get it? They were closely monitored to ensure strong links before they opened their company. A risk of a supplier failing in providing the right quality will be addressed using careful supplier selection, training, certification, and monitoring. Those are measures that have been taken by Darden restaurants to control the quality of their suppliers and reduce associated risks. And you can look at the other um, uh, risk areas or risk identified and the reduction tactics and some of the examples in these slides. With global supply chains, shipments get either misrouted, stolen, damaged, or excessively delayed. With the advancement in technologies, sensors and tracking devices can be used to track shipment locations. Motion sensors can be used on containers to detect motions, broken seals, temperature changes, and radioactivity. Using tracking systems can help expedite shipments. Some of the issues that can be identified in managing the integrated supply chain are supply chain partners that are inclined to focus on maximizing local profit or minimizing immediate costs based on their limited knowledge. A local spike in the demand due to one event in a local retail store can trigger a magnified response at the manufacturing level and the suppliers of supplier level. Neither the distributor nor the manufacturer knew that it was one time because of a promotion or because of a local event. Sometimes incentives push merchandise into the supply chain for sales that have not occurred. This generates fluctuations that are ultimately expensive to all members of the supply chain. The manufacturer will produce more and will order more from supplier of supplier, and everybody will be producing more just to fulfill the demand, and that demand was just for that event and it will not last and it will not be sustained. Suppliers and manufacturers are biased towards large lots because they tend to reduce unit cost and shipping cost, but that will increase inventory holding and do not reflect actual sales. So managing the integrated supply chain is very hard and needs skills or skillful managerial skills. The magnification effect will extend all the way in the supply chain, causing a sudden increase in the demand, and this what's called or what we call it the bullwhip effect. The bullwhip effect can cause a great damage in the supply chain. If the supply chain was managed effectively, opportunities will be created. Those opportunities are summarized in this slide and the next two slides. If the supply chain was managed effectively, an accurate pull date will be generated by sharing the point of sales information to know which products have the highest demand and schedule for production and delivery. Through the computerized ordering system, net of what have been sold and what exists in the inventory will be adjusted and ordered directly from the supplier. Lot size can be reduced can be reduced through developing economical shipments of less than truckload lots and through providing discounts based on the total annual volume and not the size of the individual shipment. In addition, techniques can be used to reduce the cost of ordering. The effective management will designate a single member in the chain to be responsible for monitoring and managing inventory in the supply chain based on a pull from the end user approach. Through effective management of the supply chain, you can use local member of the supply chain to maintain inventory for both manufacturer and retailer. In most cases, will be a distributor. This approach is called vendor managed inventory. Um, as another effort to manage inventory in the supply chain, partners can use collaborative planning, forecasting, and replenishment approach. With this approach, members of the supply chain will share planning, demand, forecasting, and inventory information. Establishing is called what we call as blanket orders or open orders, which is a contract to purchase certain items from a vendor. Actual orders will be released based on a shipping requisition or an agreed on document. And the last one is the purchasing department that should order a standardized group of components. Also, other opportunities such as postponement of product modifications as long as possible to minimize internal variety while maximizing external variety. The integrated supply chain allowed the electronic ordering and fund transfer to speed up transactions and reduce paperwork and delays. Transactions between partners of the supply chain use electronic data interchange system to transmit secured funds. Since it's an integrated chain, the supplier can ship the item by passing the seller and directly to the end user. This approach is called drop shipping, which saves time and reshipping cost. It's another way to do that, or there is another way to do that, to order special packaging where the label on the package will have the final destination of the package also. So you don't have even to worry about the final package. You print the address for the end user and ship it to the end user. The last one is for opportunities. Partners could use blockchain to add blocks of information after each firm validate transactions as they progress along the production, shipping, and delivery phases of the supply chain. With integrated supply chains, partners will continue to identify opportunities for improvement to respond as fast as possible with the lowest cost. So those are like 11, almost 11 opportunities that we introduced. Other opportunities might appear or might be identified by the partners themselves. That will be all for this session. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you and have a great day.